All right, so let's take one like the nomination for Department of Defense. Okay, he believes that women should not be in infantry. Okay, so on a podcast, he went through all the reasons why women, by and large, shouldn't be in the military as infantry,
like front lines,
lines.
basically. Yeah,
Right. And the conversation, if allowed to explain the depth of that kind of a conversation, would be in order to include most women, you'd have to lower standards so that they could pass the tests that you put in front of them. And then no fellow infantryman wants to have the person next to them that has their back to have lower standards. That makes everybody kind of weaker, right?
Yeah.
But
it's dangerous.
That headline that you would have looked up, he said the words, women should not be in infantry. In his beliefs. That would not be a lie if somebody said, you don't think women should be in infantry. And he said, he countered that with, what I meant, right, was I'm not in favor of the standards being lower. If there is a woman that doesn't have to make the standards be lowered and she can do everything a guy could do, and it doesn't make the infantry worse, right?
Yeah.
Then totally qualified.
Yeah.
And that, and that's why, like I said, politics makes all this kind of stupid, because if you didn't know whether or not it was a man or a woman, and you were just looking on the measurements of what they could do, and you approved it based on what was on the paper, not knowing what gender or not knowing what you were, you would approve that, right, on its merits. And that's where I think we're headed. But I think there's a lot of people that are going to be upset about that. Because what if you don't measure up? Are there a lot of people in positions right now that wouldn't have gotten there? So let's just take, you take somebody that's of minority status and you want them to go to college, and you take someone who's been studying their whole life and is an Asian descent, and they deserve to be in college. Now you have a choice. You've only got so many seats in college. Do you take the merits and put the person that belongs there? And you're like, oh, there isn't a lot of these minorities in that position, and I'd really like the minorities to have those positions. It only seems fair. More educated minorities mean that they can do more things with that education in the future. So it feels good to do that until I tell you that this person over here who has superior measurements is going to be deprived of it. Isn't that a victim of what feels good over here and put somebody in a position that doesn't deserve to be there?
Yeah. Like, do you squander amazing potential in hopes that the other will develop potential when they may or may not?
If you're allowed to talk about it, in everything that you do over here that has good intentions has an extreme cost on, on the other side. So you put women in infantry. You take a pros and cons list. You take a person that can do it. They can carry the same weight. They can run the same speed. They can shoot with the same accuracy. Right.
Yeah.
And then now they're a distraction for infantrymen who now are attracted to the opposite sex, and where that wouldn't have been a problem if it were all men.
Yeah.
But it is now a problem, and you're allowed to put that on the cons list and figure out a way. Maybe you have an infantry comprised completely of just women to keep that. So you're able to solve the problems without just like, that's the blockade now. Are either you're sexist, where you think women and men shouldn't be together in the infantry, or you think that, broad brush, that they just can't do the job, so keep them completely out. And that's how the debate went down. It was one of those two extremes. Where do I think this dude is, anti-woman and whatever? No, I think he's a soldier, and I think he's come to some conclusions. And I think that if he gets advocacy in both departments, they'll come with some kind of reasonable deal. I don't think he's going to be like, I hate women so much, I want to get them out of everything. I want them back in the kitchen, and I want them just having babies. And
which is why I say, when you see a headline or you hear somebody said something and your immediate reaction is to, what? That is so offensive, then look into it first.
But if you were to look into it and hear and look at the transcripts from the podcast, because it was a 1 hour discussion about it, would you have gotten details to find out that this dude really meant one thing when that's not what he said whatsoever? I would be able to write, if I was a Democrat and I wanted to take aim at Republicans, and I could take exactly what he said without any context, taking it out of context, I could write that headline that he wants women out of the military and be 100% accurate. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those hearings, confirmation hearings, followed that vein. And it was accurate. There was no lies told during that deal, but you wouldn't have gotten, and I believe that you wouldn't have gotten the whole truth. But what if he did feel that way? What if at the time when he was there a couple years ago, he did feel like, yeah, we should just get women out of the military. And now out of the prospect, just like Zuckerberg and the Trump administration, now since he's been commissioned to be, or he's been nominated to be the leader of the Department of Defense, all of a sudden he's like, yeah, those feelings aren't going to jive with this opportunity to be it. I'm allowed to change my mind now. Like, okay, well, before I felt like no women should be. Well, let's let the meritocracy of women win in this. Maybe we will include them. Is he allowed to then change his mind from 3 years ago to now?
Is he allowed?
Yeah.
Sure.
Does he get a pass from somewhat his critics to say, oh, he just changed his mind? He got new information, new opportunity.
Yeah, he probably won't get a pass. They're going to come at that and be like, oh, you're backtracking. So because it's benefiting you. And
just like Zuckerberg.